What is mania?
Mania is classified as a state where the individual patient um, becomes manic. And a state of mania would involve someone speaking very quickly, pressured speech, so fast that you wouldn't really understand it in a full throttle mania. Uh, and if you could slow it down with a recording, the actual words make sense and they're in there, which is very interesting. That the brain can cause you to speak so quickly. Um, and then when you slow it down, the word sentence structure is on normal tempo, normal speed.
Mania essentially consists of an increase in mood or sometimes irritability when the person is feeling really good but gets frustrated by something. Energy, high energy is another feature, so they feel full of energy 24/7. They don't need to sleep very much because they're full of energy. They don't get tired. They're always on the go. They talk a lot. They talk faster. They talk louder. They talk more. They have ideas that are, we call grandiose, because they have really big ideas. They can change the world. They suddenly have $1 million in their bank account. They can do anything they want to do. They're going to set up a new company just like that without any way of doing so.
So these types of things is the first one to say, well, what's happening to the brain during a manic episode? Well, it's spinning quickly and out of control. It'd be, for example, a gyro on a motor just spinning out of control.
They may be very impulsive. They may drive too fast. They may become sexually promiscuous. They often overspend, spending money they don't have or spending their credit cards up to the limit. These would be the sort of things we would look for in someone who's manic.
Now, what happens? Well, there's a lot of symptoms that go along with the manic episode. You can begin to lose your sense of reality. You can become psychotic. It all comes down to one defined sentence, which is extremely high risk behavior, and with little or no remorse at that time for what you're doing, because you really don't know that it's the wrong thing to do. And so it quickly affects your socioeconomic status, your bank accounts, your relationships, your marriage. Um, and at the beginning, if it's a hypomanic episode, it might just be an exciting person to be with.
What is a bipolar disorder?
Well, just as the term bipolar, I mean, if I drew you a graph, the graph would go up and it would go down and come back. That's the bipolar swing. If this is a neutral state where everyone is, you would start off with your mood swinging up to mania, and then coming down over time, back to normal, and then swinging into what we would call a depression, and then back to normal again, and then back to mania. This can happen over a number of months. And the bipolar patient has a real rough time with the mood swings. Now, some people like their bipolar states. Some people have a real rough time with them. The other impulsive behavior could be drug addiction and a lot of other problems, such as not being able to hold an employment. And again, as we said before, relationship issues, drug issues, and the problems go on and on. With treatment, with a mood stabilizer, and for years, a lithium salt has been the drug of choice. And that goes way back to cowboy days when they had lithium water for nervous conditions, they called it. The problem is lithium can be toxic. It's not dosed exactly.
How, in a bipolar disorder, do symptoms of both mania and depression occur at once?
When I was a resident, at first I didn't understand that, but then began realizing that actually so-called mixed bipolar disorder is actually very common, and a lot of patients actually have a little bit of both, and usually it's mostly depression with a little mania, or mostly mania with a little depression, as opposed to equal amounts of both, but some mixture of symptoms is common. We don't really know why that is, but again, they're essentially the same illness. That's why we call it bipolar disorder. So presumably in the way the brain works, you can have both present at the same time, or some of each present.
Usually you'll get a mania. The mania will subside, and then the depression will begin. You could have a mixed picture though, which is also a possibility. We call bipolar mixed. And there's also what we call an hypomania or cyclothymia. And the cyclothymia is really just more of a muted version of bipolar.
What is bipolar 1?
We classify bipolar disorder into 2 or 3 types. Bipolar disorder type 1 refers to a combination of mania and depression. So mania is the full-blown version of mania where things are fairly extreme, even psychotic. I tend to reserve the word mania for people who have manic symptoms with psychosis, but we vary a little bit in that. Bipolar disorder 2 refers to people who have recurring depression along with recurring hypomania. Hypomania, which is Greek for small mania, is mild manic symptoms, so it's not as extreme. And so if your bipolar disorder has only hypomania rather than the full-blown mania, we call that bipolar disorder 2, whereas bipolar disorder 1 is recurring full-blown mania and depression. Some people refer unofficially to a bipolar disorder type 3, which refers to mild episodes of hypomania and mild depression, or to something called cyclothymia, which is defined differently by different people, but I regard cyclothymia as people who stay within the normal range but have high normal moods and low normal moods. I call that cyclothymia.
How might depression induce an episode of mania?
It used to be thought that mania was a so-called defense against depression, and people will be high in order to avoid going low, and I think sometimes we see something like that go on, but for the most part I think they just occur spontaneously. If we look at it the other way around, it's very common to see people who are manic come to the end of the mania and then they crash downwards into depression. And I found that if you can prevent the mania, you often reduce the frequency of depression. So in other words, I far more often see mania leading to depression rather than depression leads to mania.
What could trigger the development of a bipolar disorder?
The cause and development is similar to general depression. They're both mood disorders. It's often a combination of genetic factors. In 50% of cases, I find that someone who presents with bipolar disorder has a family history of a grandparent or a parent or a sibling having bipolar disorder. And when you combine the genetic vulnerability to it, along with stress, particularly in adolescence or early 20s, that comes together quite often to trigger the actual episode of illness. Other factors may contribute, for example, in particular, things like if we often see college students becoming bipolar the first time with mania because they've gotten behind in their sleep, they're under examination stress, like at this time of year, they're behind in their sleep, and the lack of sleep may be the last straw. Or sometimes it's drinking, and lack of sleep will do it, as examples.
How does medication help to manage a bipolar disorder?
The treatment of bipolar disorder is divided into 2 parts. One is treating the mania and preventing the mania, and the other part is treating the depression. And some medications will treat both. More often they don't, and we have to treat both poles separately. So in treating the mania, we primarily use 3 kinds of medication. We use what we call mood stabilizers. These are drugs like lithium, or another one called divalproex. And these help control the mania after a few days. Another group that we use are the antipsychotic drugs, and they are anti-manic as well as antipsychotic, and so they work. And in some people with acute mania, when they're coming into hospital, we'll use what we call benzodiazepines. These are like lorazepam or diazepam, clonazepam, the Valium and Ativan types of drugs, short-term, to help get people under control.
Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
The problem with bipolar disorder, if in a sense, is that people feel good when they're manic and they don't recognize initially that they're ill. They think it's everyone else who's wrong.